Do you have your tickets yet? This is officially going to be the shortest ad in Living Church podcast history. Quick reminder to get your tickets for the Awe and Presence Conference if you don't have them yet. We're going to explore what it means to worship with the church of the past, what the body does in worship, how liturgy works, understanding the story we're in, and George Herbert on prayer. What could get better than that? Go to livingchurch.org/events for more info and to register, or click the link in the show notes today. I would love to see you in St. Louis.
Everything in here that's really good was a surprise. And where do surprises come from? We know that. We know the answer to that.
The Living Church, serving the Episcopal Church and the Anglican Communion since 1878. Welcome to the Living Church podcast. Welcome back, podcast listeners. A few weeks ago, I got in my car and I drove down to gorgeous and Gothic Savannah, Georgia. I was down there visiting friends at St. John's Episcopal Church and Christ Church Anglican. And amid the time that I spent admiring Spanish moss, walking downtown, seeing beautiful waterways, and frankly, stuffing my face with local pastries and such, I joined a particular friend of mine at St. John's for a conversation about a new book that she wrote. And since this conversation just happened to be public, it was an interview as part of St. John's Sunday night sessions, I decided to use it as an episode of the podcast. So today, you'll hear a conversation I had with novelist H.S. Cross, Heather to those who have the pleasure of knowing her. And we've had her on the podcast before to talk about her first two novels, English Boarding Schools, Christmas and Easter, and The Power of Nostalgia. And also just to say, we've had the associate rector of St. John's on the podcast too, Father Jonathan Jameson, who before he was a priest was a musician in an indie rock band. You can find links to both those episodes in the show notes. Today, we head to Green Meldrum House, where St. John's hold their Sunday night sessions, and oh, by the way, where Custer signed the 40 acres and a mule deal in the dining room. And there you will enjoy my Sunday night session with Heather about 1920s Oxford, love stories and their theological significance, what it's like to create, and then watch your creations surprise you. The importance of play, why skipping the hard stuff risks a story no longer feeling real, and the need to, as she puts it, hold your nerve and not rush the ending. And finally, since her novel is a messy and complicated and sexual romance, in some parts, as she puts it, rated R, what does it mean in this kind of story to tell the truth or to get caught writing while Christian? This is a lovely conversation for book lovers, or if you're just walking your dog or taking a drive and you want something interesting to listen to, but also I think for anyone who is in a position of writing or speaking or trying to tell the truth in a messy and complicated world. H.S. Cross has been a tutor and a writer and is the author of 3 novels, Wilberforce, Grievous, and her latest novel, Amanda. If you want to see our faces as you're hearing our voices, you can also enjoy our conversation on YouTube. I'll share a link in the show notes. And finally, thanks to St. John's Episcopal Church, Savannah, for making this conversation possible. Actually, you know what? At the moment that I am recording this, October 2025, I will share this with you. St. John's is looking for an associate for youth and young adults. So if you're interested in this ministry and if you want to live in Savannah, Georgia, I'll drop a link in the show notes to the job description. Check it out. Now, rock your best Oxford bags and handkerchief hemlines. We're headed to the 1920s, where we'll meet a couple of God-haunted lovers, the woman who wrote them, and discover what faith has to do with fiction. We hope you enjoy the conversation. Hi, Heather.
Hey.
How you doing tonight?
I'm great.
Good. Heather, you came on my podcast once. We talked about your first 2 novels.
Yes.
And that was an extremely fun time. So tonight we're here and we're going to talk about faith, fiction, being a writer, writing as a Christian, all that good stuff. But I kind of want to do it a little bit of an Emily Dickinson way, like tell the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies. I would love to just dig into your book, actually, the story that you have created, the characters, the themes. And then I have a feeling that once we get into that, we're going to have touched on in a sort of a circular way, and maybe even in a deeper way than if we did it directly, what it means to be writing as a Christian. Could we start off with, I think you prepared a reading for us. I'd love to hear an excerpt from your novel, Amanda.
Cool. Well, the excerpt that I prepared here is the two main characters are Jamie and Marion, although they have many names, and he's also called Jasper, Jas, so there's a little bit of that. They are the couple in the story, and the excerpt I have here is when they meet for the first time. So it's 1926. We are in England, in Oxford. They are apart. They have been together for 4 years. Now they're separated. Each one of them is sort of remembering the other and wrestling with the past. And she's a governess in London. He's just been hired as a headmaster. What we're having here is first her point of view, then his, the memory of their first meeting. Oh, the mind has mountains, and what mountains did he have? Tell the truth, she was always thinking of him. But when she noticed, she set to thinking something else. His education was oversold. He was a man, so knew nothing of reality. He was born with the silver spoon, so on and on. He seemed the kind of boy every girl wanted. Fair, charming, unmaimed, and alive. But he was so much not what he seemed. And when he threw the drink at her that first night after the reading, pretending to spill it, she could have walked right off, as she had from so many. She had a way of testing boys. She might toss a rude gesture across the room, as she'd done to the barman that night of the spilled drink. Jasper saw it, and with a mirthful tone he said, "How strangely a human voice clangs on one's ears." He was quoting something, but she didn't want to give him the satisfaction of asking what. Later, she tested him again with questions. She'd met boys who were cagey or lying, but most men would talk on and on if you gave them your beautiful attention. He, by contrast, absorbed each question as if running it through a translation service, to the point that she wondered if her accent was slipping. After answering several of her queries, he rubbed out his cigarette, cast himself into her gaze, and asked her if she'd ever found herself in the open air unable to breathe. He asked in full sincerity, like a scientist undertaking an investigation. "Yes," she told him. "Have you?" He nodded as though they knew each other already. His hand fluttered near hers, but he didn't do the flirt's thing of brushing against her finger. "Tell me?" She said one time at a pub, they'd brought in a man who had been stabbed and laid him on the table, and a strong breeze rushed in the windows. My hair was blowing in my eyes. Papers flew across the floor. And the man? His stomach was falling out like sausages. I couldn't tie my ribbon because my hands weren't working, and someone looked through the window and asked, "Now what, eh?" And a sentence ran in my head. What sentence? His voice made her feel she could walk into the mountains and never have to come back. "And you?" He didn't ask her to clarify because he already understood her, that she was asking about breathing. People were drowning. In the sea? In the gas. She asked what he wrote. He looked surprised, though it was a question everyone asked at readings such as this. Not poems. What then? He looked as though he could see vanished glades. She decided he was a famous author incognito. It was the only explanation for why he wasn't trying to show his writings. All men wanted you to be their mother, to read their awful compositions and tell them well done. Do you think, he said, that everything is as different since the war? She had the kind of voice that stirred him in his root. She smoked as she read her poem in that cellar of the Egg and Ostrich, her voice animating the words in a way that could slay the hardest heart, revive the deadest mind, hurt the bravest organ. He'd taken her for a student at one of the ladies' colleges, perhaps a radical, the knit crimson hat. But when she came to the end of the poem, to the bit about songs echoing in darkness, he knew without understanding how, that she was a person, possibly the only person, who'd felt the suffering and desire that plagued him. After she stepped off the stage that first night, Jamie had been seized with an unfamiliar urgency. He had never imagined there could be a person of the female sex capable of knowing and loving his most private aspects. His sisters always behaved as though they knew him better than he could ever know himself. They had been alive longer and could remember things he was too young to recall, including so many embarrassing episodes that he suspected them of inventing to humiliate him. And so they presumed to know him. They didn't know him. His father didn't know him. There was no person living who knew him. But suddenly, in a gesture of cosmic surprise, here was one who could. She was flirting with a boy behind the bar. Jamie bought a drink and proceeded to spill it down the front of her mustard-colored cardigan. She didn't shriek or jump off her stool, but she turned on him an evil eye that disordered his pulse there in the suffocating cellar.
So clearly this is a love story that you've written. And I'm going to try for us to talk about it with no spoilers. But so this is not a simple love story. And these are two very complicated people, if anyone didn't catch that. These are two intellectuals. At least one of them is a poet. They both have trauma in their past from she was in Ireland. There's some political intrigue that resulted in violence. He's been in World War I. There was, in the gas and in the trenches, and some stuff with their families that we hear alluded to as well. So these are deeply wounded, deeply complicated people that you have the beautiful job of trying to understand them and bring them together. And I'd love to just ask you about love stories for a minute, because classically speaking, a love story can fall generally into one of two categories. It can either be a tragedy, like Romeo and Juliet, or it can be a comedy, not meaning necessarily like ha ha ha, but in terms of moving toward a place of hope rather than toward death, literal or otherwise. I hope you don't mind me saying that your book is a comedy in that sense, and that there's a movement toward hope even in this very complicated story of two very wounded people. So first, can I just ask, why did you decide to write this kind of story? Why a love story?
Well, I think in this case, it's more that I discovered that it was a love story in the course of writing it.
Oh.
The given circumstances are that they're married in another book. So I wanted to know how they got together, but I wasn't really sure it was a love story as a novel, but it became clear that that really was the engine. And then once I realized that that was going to be the design and the engine of the novel, I was really into it. A literary love story, not the rom-com, but because so many literary love stories are tragic, and yet, ye old lived experience is that there's hope.
Yeah.
Right? It can also be tragic. And so I wanted to sort of push against that and find out what goes on in the hope direction when it isn't just rom-com formula,
Yeah. Well, I often find I don't know if you find this too, Heather, but in a lot of contemporary love stories, films or books, it's like the stories are nice and complex and meaty, but it's almost like if the people are complex and the world is complex and the situations are complex, there's no way there can be a hopeful ending. It's got to at least be very ambiguous, and so there's not that, partly because in another book, like she said, they are married in one of her other novels. And so this book was partly a way to figure out, how did these two people get together? Yeah. Which I think is an interesting place to start. How do you think the love story genre can go wrong? And do you think there's theological significance somewhere in a love story that feels real?
I'm not the theologian, but I think that what can go wrong is it can be shallow, it can be false, right? You can move things for them. It can be unearned. And although that can be really enjoyable, because I love me some candy romance, especially in the Netflix series. It's
oh my gosh, Hallmark during Christmas.
Really fun. But I think that if it's those things, then it isn't really true. And if it isn't deeply, complicatedly, is that a word, true?
Yes.
then the audience is left longing for a thing that isn't true. I mean, okay, fiction is all not true, but it's true, right? And I feel like as a writer, I want to make a thing that is true, that a person can hope for a true thing, albeit fictional in another time period. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Can you say more about that? How fiction is not true, but it's true. It can be true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope that the human experience in this novel and the other novels ring true and are speaking about humanity in a true way and about our bigger reality in a true way. And I think that comes about not from the number of photorealistic details that you put in your book, but from letting the characters be truly alive and out of control and in their own agency and not mine, and letting them earn where they go and letting them suffer and not, I sound like I'm contradicting myself because it was predetermined where they're going. And yet I couldn't get them there until they really got there on their own. And there was a long time I wasn't sure. I just didn't know how it was ever going to be. It seemed impossible they were going to get there. It really did for like years of working on this book. I don't know, maybe I'm just sounding like a woo-woo righty there.
I also write fiction. And so the experience of something, it came from you, but then you're also thinking, did this also come somehow from outside of me? I don't know. I just got to keep writing. And it's not a good story until at some point your characters surprise you.
Right.
And even though you're controlling every detail, they do break out of your control in some way. And that's interesting. And again, I'm curious about theological significance. I have all my, friends who believe in predestination in my head saying, well, God knew where it would go from the beginning, but don't we have free will, and hearing that interplay. So can you say more about what that process is like for you as a writer of bringing two people who technically don't exist, but you've brought them into existence in the imaginary realm. Now you're responsible for them, but you're also responsible to continue to create them so that they can start moving on their own in ways that surprise even you. What is that experience like?
It's uncomfortable in the period of writing when you're just generating material and you're letting them come to life. It's kind of like holding your breath while you're typing and whatever is coming out is like, it's sort of like, I don't know. I often pray before I write, just like, let it come out, like whatever it's going to be. And if I'm like consciously making decisions and having them do things, it's just utter dreck. I throw it out like it's terrible. You would never want to read it. And so I think that as a writer, it's more of a process of investigation of like, who are they? Like, are they going to tell me their secrets or not? Oh, this is such a spoiler. I don't know whether to say it, but we're going to get there.
It's up to you.
We're going to get there. So one of the main characters has had a pregnancy loss.
Yeah.
So I knew she didn't have a baby later. I knew she was pregnant now. And I'm like, what happened? What happened? I didn't know for years. And I mean, of course I could think of a lot of things and doing my research and it's not resolving the problem. And I just couldn't, like, they wouldn't give me the answer. And it was at the end of a month-long retreat in Scotland and the very last day, like the last afternoon, and I'm kind of free writing or whatever. And it all came out. Like she told me all of it. And I was, at the end of it, I was shaking. I was sobbing. It was really like, I didn't know what happened to me. It was completely shocking. And it just felt like being in the presence of something really alive and scary and exciting. And, that doesn't happen all the time. But, you wait and you ask and you listen long enough without stepping on their toes, they'll tell you their secrets. That's what I'd say.
It sounds to me a bit like the process of discernment.
Oh.
So it's almost like you had a spiritual experience. And would you describe it that way? And like,
I mean, not wanting to like get woo-woo and say, my characters are alive really somewhere in another, like I don't want to really go there.
Parallel universe. No. Okay. Well,
but,
scratch that question off.
But, and like why I describe it, like they tell me their secrets, like I'm not like demented, but that's the only way I can really describe how that feels, right? And I do feel like all of these surprises, they come from outside of me. I mean, I guess they're coming through my unconscious as well, but they're not a thing where I like decided to write that, Yeah. The really good, everything in here that's really good was a surprise. And where do surprises come from? We know that. We know the answer to that. So, kind of just trying to keep yourself open for that.
Yeah. Today's episode is brought to you in part by the Poetry for All podcast. Poetry for All features award-winning teachers talking about poems that transform, enliven, challenge, enrich us. It opens the world of poetry to everyone through a simple approach. So in each episode, the host will read a poem, discuss it with a guest, and then they'll read it one more time. They take a stance of wonder toward each work while helping others into the many different experiences that a great poem might elicit. The podcast has thousands of listeners and a growing audience, and it covers classics like Shakespeare, Wheatley, and Whitman, alongside contemporary voices like Poet Laureate Ada Limon, Joy Harjo, and Carl Phillips. Whether you already love poetry or you're trying to figure it out for the first time, give it a listen. You can find Poetry for All wherever you get podcasts. I'd like to turn a little bit of a corner here because as I was reading your novel, something just kept, like a wave of water just kept hitting me in the face in terms of theme and choices these characters are making, that I'm curious partly whether this was on purpose or whether this is a surprise. Maybe I'm saying it right now and it'll be a surprise to you. So you mentioned already the characters have multiple names.
Yeah.
Okay. Not only do they have multiple names for various reasons, family, friends, lovers, calling each other different things, they've also got nicknames. They've also got names that they're hiding from other people. There's one point where one of the characters wears a mask to be in the presence of another one of the characters and to kind of be himself without the other character knowing that it's him. Marion, the main character of the book, plays spy with the children she's nannying all the time, where they're pretending. There are lovers who role play as part of their lovemaking. And so pretending and playing comes up constantly in your book, either as a way to hide from another person or a way to be vulnerable and reveal oneself to another person. Again, tell the truth, but tell it slant, success, and circuit lies. So I'm curious, did you weave in this theme of playing and pretend intentionally, or did it emerge as part of the story, and why?
Well, it emerged from those two people as being really playful people deep down. And so then you put them together and it was this explosion of it. And it was like, and then it was just fun, for me too. Like, I feel like I miss play. There isn't enough play.
Oh, yeah.
You can both be a thing and not have to own it or keep it or commit to it. Mm-hmm. And yet it can be true. It doesn't get stuck to you. Mm-hmm. It's a way to experiment, to get very close to someone. Dangerous, very dangerous, especially today when we're not allowed, you're constantly being pressed to make a public take on something that's going to be permanently there forever in the whole world. And, so all this play just doesn't really get to occur. And I think it's a really creative, expansive, and joyful space. Mm-hmm. And it was also part of the writing getting out of control. Like whenever I would let it get out of control, they'd be doing these bonkers things. And I'm like, okay, you two. I don't know what to say.
Get a room, you guys.
We'll see if it keeps it in the final copy. I don't know, So I don't know if that answers the question, really.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm curious then, because they are two very playful people who find that they're both not only connecting in their suffering and their desire, but they're also connecting in their sense of, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And you make a joke and I get the joke. I pretend to spill my drink on you and you give me the evil eye. But I know that also means come over here and let's talk. It's very rare to find a person that someone would connect with that way. So I'm curious, what's taken these people so long? They have this huge connection, and then what is the holdup? It takes them a whole novel to decide, how to proceed.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's so true. They're to get, we get their backstory and they're in love and we're like, oh my gosh, nothing can stop this. And then the story opens to the present and they're not together.
Nuh-uh.
And it's it's the end. I'll just tell you.
It's the end before it's the beginning.
Before they see, it's final pages, right? And I just couldn't get them there any faster. But they're going about their everyday lives where things are happening and they're making decisions about what they're going to do and who they're going to be and all these things. And they're ruminating on the past and their past and each other and what they have done with each other and what it means. And they're getting in each sort of circle through it, it gets deeper and deeper and more honest. And there's also an element, and I'll just like put someone on the spot in here. A few years ago, I was talking about the comedy love story with Cody Moran and others. And I was like, I really understand what the tragedy is. What's the comedy? And Cody said something to the effect of, well, I think it's a process of purification for the parties. And that really clicked with me because that seemed to be what was going on in the novel. And I think it's a great description that there's a process of purification for each of them. And that is purification of their motives, their pasts, their actions, and their relationship with their God, which is a theme, but it ends up, that's another thing they're circling. And until that really gets sorted out, they don't seem to be able to really choose each other. And whether that's for her, for example, like choosing the hope of it. And she can't do that until those other things are cleared out. And so I think that's really the engine of the story.
That reminds me of what J.R.R. Tolkien describes as, and he may have even coined this word, a eucatastrophe. Has anyone ever heard of this word? Some people just looked at each other meaningfully. It describes the catastrophe as the tragedy, or it's the bad thing that happens. We all know what a catastrophe is. But the eucatastrophe is the unbelievable, surprising good thing that then happens that trumps, but also gathers up and almost transfigures all of the junk, as well as the complexity, as well as the woundedness, as well as the questions, as well as the gas in the trenches, and the pregnancy that was lost, and all of the family issues. And it takes it up, and carrying it with it carries it into this end. And so I wonder, you just seem determined to go through all that reality with them. Am I right about that? You're just sort of like, we're not going to get to the end without dealing. It's like you're in almost like couples counseling with these people. You're like, no, we're going to talk about this. And they keep going through again and again the same questions and the same doubts and the same mistakes until something clears up. Can you say a little more about that? Like what that's like?
It was really anxiety provoking because I didn't think I could finish the book. Like it didn't seem like it was going to finish.
I wonder if God ever feels that way. Not anxious necessarily, but like, oh man, when is this? Like, when can we? Come on, people! Like, God,
I think we feel that way.
We certainly do.
Like
That's
the kingdom
true.
come, like when though?
Yeah. How long, O Lord?
Yeah, and there was this other, and this is kind of a personal thing. They spend a lot of time remembering each other. Okay, it was 4 years ago, but it feels like this unreachable past. Like they just can't get back to it, and. I was widowed 17 years ago. And so there's a sense of like, also that's the same space of like, I can't get back to that. And because I really can't get back to it, I felt like, how can they get back to it? And eventually I had to like separate us. But it was more them dragging their feet. Cause I was like, couldn't I just skip to the end? Like maybe this is it. And we just cut. And then whenever that would happen, it would seem like, flat and dull and like, why does anyone ever do anything? It's all super boring. And I'm like, okay, well, that's the wrong track. And so it was really delicate, and you had to just like really hold your nerve and not rush the ending.
Yeah. In the process that they're going through, this messy process, it's not like the end is the first time they get together. They have times when they're together, and then something happens that they're apart then for some space of time. And this is what they're working through to get to this final end.
The book opens at the, boy loses girl, boy has lost girl stage.
Yes. So, but they have had a romance before then.
Yeah. Big time.
And I wanted to, and they've like taken some huge risks that seem to be worth it, and also made some mistakes. And it's just, they're messy humans. I'd like to talk a little bit about sexuality and how it comes out in your book. There's a lot of sexual content in the book. Much of it is referred to in flashback or like with period appropriate euphemisms. But this is clearly their sexuality is clearly a driving fire in the main characters' lives. It's part of them being passionate and playful people. It's one of the main ways that they like communicate and process things in the world. The ways that they live it out isn't
always very healthy, but they are very embodied, very messy human people. So I'd love to hear more from you about how the characters' sexuality, even with all its hits and misses, how this fills out their human journey and is integral to it, rather than being like, we have a little sexy sideline over here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is also maybe more, is it a worldview of mine? I don't know, that it's all one package, right? You know, the intellect, the profession, the family, the faith, the body, sexuality, friendship. It's all the human being. And so neither of them is neurotic about their sexual appetite or interest or whatever. Maybe that's not super realistic for Britain. I don't know, but they're not neurotic. And so it just sort of flows for them. And they're not really putting boundaries on it. Also, I'm not sure about this, but I think that there's something, this is in the mid-20s. British European society has had such a destruction in the First World War, and everything that Edwardian society stood for, its values, its boundaries, have all just been kicked to the curb, especially by this younger generation who don't want to hear it. And, you know, there's the flappers, you know, all of it. And this is a little bit like, I guess, Roaring '20s Oxford style. But so there's a sense that they're among people who are done with convention. And that's maybe giving more permission for some of their looser stuff. But also, you know, in a love story, you have intense attraction to a human being, and an element of that is sexual, and you can't really unpick, you know, the emotion and the body and all of it. And so it's rated R.
Just so y'all know.
Yeah, I would say tell me if you think it's accurate. I would say it's frank, but not crude.
Sure. I'd say maybe I've seen things on Netflix that were TV-14 that I would say go under that category.
Yeah. I'd say frank, but not like grossly explicit.
Yeah. Right. I mean, and also it is so integrated into who they are and part of their reality and part of the gifting and the brokenness that they're working out as they journey toward one another. But you also, like, as you were talking about the way that they're journeying toward one another and working out the same questions, the same issues before they can kind of successfully come together and get a shot at this, I don't think you explicitly said anything about this also being a God journey. But that does become explicit in the book. Like at a certain point, the male lead, let's call him, Jamie, he keeps referring to the old boy. And at first I thought he was talking about his dad, who's an Anglican priest. Oh, that the old boy, this and that. And I realized, he's talking about God.
Yeah.
He's just sort of like working on his issues with God. At the same time, he's something's been working on him. Mm-hmm. It's not that he's like, okay, let me work through my marriage workshop workbook or whatever, but which is great. Good if you're doing that. But something's working on him.
Right.
That's very intense and intentional and almost like a hound of heaven kind of situation.
Both of them.
Yes. I would love to hear more about that and what that process was like as an author. Like, when did you realize God is chasing them toward each other? Is that how you describe it?
I don't know that he's chasing them towards each other. He's trying to pull both of them to him.
Yes.
But, why do they meet? Right? Both of them experience it as like, how did this even happen that we meet? Both of them have at least one intense encounter of vocation that feels different than anything that they've ever had, aren't quite sure what to make of it. They both have different issues. At a certain point, each of them think they're an atheist, tell themselves that they are. One of the really nice permissions about writing in the world of this book, so it's the 20s, but we're in England, and we also have one character who's in an ecclesiastical family. She's Roman Catholic, but very broken from that.
Irish
Catholic, yeah.
And he's like Oxford English boy. Daddy is an Anglican priest.
A bishop.
He's a bishop. That's right.
Daddy's a bishop. Godfather runs a theological college, Anglo-Catholic, like the whole deal. So there's a given that there's this world of church and of theology. And so I don't have to like apologize for that, which is really nice. It can just be their environment, or at least his environment. And she's got a little bit more of an attitude about it. So we're able to bring that different point of view in. And especially for her, you know, what does it look like when that is not something you believe or understand the world that way? And yet things are happening to you that you can't quite explain any other way. And what else can you hold on to at the end of the day? I mean, interesting. So my publishers, you know, they write the jacket copy and all this and the tagline for the book, and they thought of this as love is the only lifeline. And I really kind of like it because it's sort of true for the two of them. And I also think it's true, like romantic love, but love is, there's another love that's the only lifeline. And I think that that is true in the book too. Not explicitly. I mean, it's not, I hope it isn't a preachy book.
No, it's not.
And I don't think that a reader has to agree with or even see the world that way to enjoy the love story.
Yeah.
Or the majority of the book. Well, we're focusing on church stuff tonight because we're in a church, but.
Right. But if we were at a
different talk in the Ann Arbor bookstore.
Yeah. In Ann Arbor, it's going to get way spicier.
Really different.
Come to Ann Arbor and find out.
Yeah.
The question that I started with about being a writer who's a Christian. This is not Christian fiction. I don't think you would describe it as Christian fiction. You literally said, this is rated R, you know, this is not for children. So what does it mean then to write fiction as a Christian, as someone with a very serious faith, versus being someone who would identify as a Christian writer or writing Christian books? How do you see that difference, and what does it mean to get caught writing while Christian?
Yeah, to get caught writing while Christian. Yeah, I am a Christian. I'm a writer. I'm writing a novel. I'm not responsible for Christianity or trying to propagate it with the fiction. But works of fiction are governed, maybe on the level of an operating system, by the beliefs of their creators, like whatever those are. And so if you're a formed Christian, those beliefs are on some, maybe even not visible level, the operating system in the world that you make. I think you can't avoid that, because of the way the unconscious works. But I think also it means to have a degree of hope, even if your characters despair or are hopeless or despair to the end, or even if your story is despairing. I feel like there's a degree of hope that has to remain kind of eschatologically, my pronunciation. And that doesn't mean you can't write depressing or tragic books.
Totally.
So for me, that's a factor. This would be true, I would hope, for almost all writers, but there's a commitment to truth.
Or there should be.
There should be. And I'm not saying that these characters can't make stuff up or the narration would say things that I don't think is true, but that on the kind of deepest, there's an honesty in a deep down there. And with that, you need a courage because you got to be able to stay with them through all the stuff. I don't know. That's a start.
Yeah. I mean, you said an honesty, but in a next question I would think is honesty about what? And then I think it's honesty about the way the world works. Honesty about what humans are.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, because you're not responsible for the church and making sure it stays aloft or that the Lord stays aloft, that's not your job. And so by describing, telling a story, which brings us into a world that actually has an operating system that actually works. Like you plug it in and it it lights up and there it is and we're in it and we're absorbed and these people actually function like we know people function, whatever kind of people they are, whatever they end up doing or however they see the world. What's so interesting is that like Jesus says, I am the truth. So it seems to me that if you are co-creating in a way this world and doing it with integrity and truth, that I wonder how he could not somehow be there in that world.
You hope for it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's really for other people to say. But I mean, I also think that whether I'm writing something like these 3 books that have a kind of explicit spiritual content in them, Or like I just drafted a novel that's like suspense. The character in it is like really doesn't care about God. It's very contemporary, right? There's just zero that's at all religious in there. And yet the operating system, like I know God's real. I know the reality is still the reality. Like it's not on the page anywhere, but it's still there. I think as an author, I'm always interested in how God might be moving in the story, in their lives, whether or not it's a thing that's ever said or acknowledged. But I'm always looking for that. I think it's probably for the reader to determine the answer to that.
Thank you, Amber.
Thanks for tuning in to the Living Church Podcast, a ministry of the Living Church. This episode was recorded by Jason Watkins of Foundry Film Company and edited and mixed by the team at Sound On, Sound Off. Learn more about their work at soundonsoundoff.com. Again, if you'd like to check out Heather's book, watch a video of our conversation, and find several other goodies, check out the show notes. In 2 weeks, what do native plants, French bakers, and stargazing have to do with Advent? Join me in the home of Sylvie Van Hooser, botanical artist and author, where we unpack her unique new Advent devotional. Until then, I'm Amber Noel, your host, and it's been good to be with you. Peace.